Welcome to the Storyboards Creativecast. I'm Jen Clark-Hall, and in each episode I'll be chatting to inspirational people working in the creative industries who will share their career stories and advice. If you want to know more about creative careers, are thinking about starting up a creative business, or just want something interesting to listen to for half an hour, this is the podcast for you. Today we're talking with Paul Greveson, who's a senior technical artist at Embark Studios, which is a Stockholm-based game studio. Welcome to the podcast, Paul. Thank you for coming on and agreeing to let me interrogate you today. Just to start, can you give us a brief introduction to who you are and what you do?
Yeah, of course. Well, it's nice to be here talking with you. Yeah, like you said, I'm a technical artist at Embark Studios. I've been in the games industry, making video games for about, must be close to 15 years now. I kind of do a bit of everything, which is how I've ended up in the technical artist role.
What do you mean by everything? What does that entail?
Right, yeah. So I guess for people who might only play video games or don't really play them at all, it's a piece of software, right? It's made up of a lot of parts. There's music, there's audio, there's models, 3D models, there's like textures, images, animations. There's programming that ties it all together, like gameplay code, engine code, things to display the pixels on the screen, things to deploy the game to your console, all this sort of stuff. So there's lots and lots of moving parts that makes up a game. And one of the roles of a technical artist is to kind of make sure that that stuff all ties together nicely, because it's quite often that you have people with very different backgrounds. So you'll have very creative people who don't know much technical stuff, and very technical people who don't know much creative stuff or don't know how to approach those kind of problems. And so a technical artist kind of sits in the middle and talks with both of those types of people, and like tries to make sure that everything is as well planned out, but also looking as good as possible. So it's kind of, for me, it's a very interesting role because it covers a lot of aspects of art, like how things look, how things should look, what the art direction of the game wants to achieve, and then also about how to make sure that like it's going to run well on your Xbox, or it's going to work on a mobile phone or whatever. And those are things that kind of need a lot of different areas of knowledge to understand.
So your title, I guess, as a senior technical artist, the artist bit's quite a deceptive term because it sounds like you have your fingers in a lot of different pots.
Yeah, exactly. I think if you go to a lot of different video games companies, especially at different sizes, though you will find people called technical artists or technical animators in some cases. But what they actually do day to day can be very different depending on the company, depending on what types of games they're making. Some of them will be doing lots of art. Some of them will be doing very little art. Some of them will be working more with engineers. Some of them will be working more with the art team and art direction. So it is a very variable role.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one of the things that draws people who want to become technical artists into that, is that it's not just about sitting down and making the coolest looking like piece of art every day, which some people love, and that's why we hire artists. And it's also not about going in and like engineering really good solid systems that can run the game reliably, which is where like programmers and engineers come in. So it's not it's not a kind of really specific role. It's a very
Yeah.
generalized role.
So the next question I was going to ask you was, what would a typical day look like for you? But I guess there is no maybe typical day.
I guess in general, it is talking to a lot of different people. So at the moment in my role as a technical artist, I'll be syncing up with my kind of team in the morning, making sure that no one's got any problems that are blocking them from working, whether it's on a technical side or an artistic side, because a lot of game development comes down to what is the experience going to be for the player. And so it's not just about like, does my character look really cool? It's about, can the player understand what this character is meant to be doing? And so then you might have to solve technical issues related to, I don't know, the animation or the size of it, or like how it's moving around the world. And that's something that not everyone understands the inner workings of the game engine. Like an animator might not know how the player moves in code, and that's okay. they don't need to do that to do their job. But if they've got a problem with that, then they need to come to someone like me who can kind of at least point them in the right direction, if not actually fix the problem for them. So there's a lot of talking to the team regularly, and then it'll be stuff like implementing new systems when we've got ideas for like, oh, we want new explosion effects when you blow up an enemy or whatever. It's like, okay, well, how are we going to put that together? Where does the information come from? Who's making the content? I probably won't be doing any of that myself. Like, we have visual effects artists who make cool looking explosions. We have gameplay programmers who write the code that drives those explosions. But I'll probably be sitting there in that meeting, like figuring out, making sure that we're not kind of doing things the wrong way, like doing something that's going to make it really complicated in a year's time, or doing something that's making life hard for the VFX artist or whatever.
So you kind of make sure all the cogs are turning in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, exactly. And just kind of grease the wheels here and there. Like if people get stuck, I'm often the person that they will come to as a first point of contact, if just to say like, oh, actually, sorry, I don't know anything about that, but this person does. You should go and talk to them. Or maybe I can be like, oh, I know exactly what that is, and I know how to fix it. Let's do that.
Well, it sounds like you've got a very varied role.
Yeah.
And thinking back to obviously when we were at school, Paul and I, for the benefit of the listeners, Paul and I were at school together, and we did graphic design together. That was sort of the first real experience that probably both of us had of any sort of computer graphics, maybe, other than playing computer games. So I know, and I kind of know roughly where it all started for you, but how did it go from GCSE graphics to what you do now? What did you do in between times?
Yeah, exactly. So you're right that like the GCSE graphic stuff was where I managed to get involved in a lot of the programs that people still use today, like Photoshop and stuff like that. And then after high school, I went to university in Abertay in Dundee and studied a computer arts course, which kind of went further down that route of how do you make art and animation using computers. So much less heavy on the kind of traditional animation stuff. That some, like if you went to more foundational art school, you'd probably be learning the fundamentals of animation, composition, and like a lot of things like that. And the course I did was slightly more technically oriented, which probably helped me get to where I am now. But it did also include aspects of stuff like doing figure life drawing once a week, which was very, very useful, and something like just understanding uh, how to draw and like how to transfer your ideas from your brain to paper in a quicker and better way. And then how to take that from paper into the computer and like make 3D models, make animations. It wasn't game specific exactly, that course, but there was actually, I think there still is, a computer games technology course at Abertay as well. And we would do little game jams with those students in that course as well. So it was very hands-on, very like building projects, a bit of a mix of everything, 3D, animation, video work. So it was quite a broad course, and a lot of different people went into a lot of different areas out of that course, from like film animation to web design, graphic design for advertising, stuff like that. But a bunch of people did go into games as a result of that. And quite a lot of my old classmates are actually now kind of like at creative director level in various places, or like animation director, stuff like that. So I think the course was quite successful.
Yeah. So when you left university and you went into the careers market, what was your first job then out of university?
So I actually had a job while I was at university that kind of got me a foot in the door, which was I was freelancing for an American company. So I was like doing my university course during the day, and then in the evenings I'd be doing contract work for like making 3D models for games. And I just did that like part-time on a weekly basis. And then I got an internship at a Dundee company that no longer exists, called Visual Science. And we were working on, I think it was PlayStation 2 games. And I was there for a few months. So that was like my first real in-studio experience, like working directly alongside level designers and game programmers and like all the people who make up an actual game development team. And again, that was like on my last year at university. And then when I left university, I applied for a job at Splash Damage, who is still going strong down in London. And I did an art test. That's actually quite a common thing that a lot of art position art positions will require from game dev companies. They often want to see you showcase your skills in a way that's applicable for that studio, because a lot of studios have different graphical styles. Like King makes Candy Crush, right? And then I don't know, Epic makes Fortnite, and then Microsoft makes Gears of War, and all those things have very different visual styles, and not everyone can do the work in that style or wants to do the work in that style. So I got an art test from that company. I actually failed it the first time, but I got
Really?
some, yeah, it wasn't up to the quality standards that they wanted, but I got some very good feedback from the art director who reviewed the test. And so I did it again, spent a couple of weeks on it, and sent it back in and got got accepted for an interview after that, and went down for interview and then got hired.
So is it a live test where you've got to do it there and then, or do you get a period of time to do it?
Yeah, so usually it's a period of time. Like, I don't think any games companies really do live tests. It's just not practical, and it's not really reflective of reality. But yeah, they usually give you a deadline. If they are going to give you a test, which not all of them do, but a lot do, they will give you a deadline and requirements and maybe some reference images and say, I'd like you to build this environment and you've got a week to do it, whatever. Some people don't like doing those tests because it's their time, and not everyone has the time to spend on that. So you kind of have to be in a bit of a privileged position to take that, which I was, I guess.
You started off doing freelance stuff at university, and in order to have the ambition and the get up and go to do that, you've got to be quite passionate about what you do. And
Yeah.
have you felt like you've been quite passionate about this going into university and coming out the other side, and still now that you're sort of 15 years into this?
Yeah, I think so. And I think that's actually something I see in a lot of people who are trying to get into the games industry, because it's a creative industry. It's kind of almost vocational. And there is a lot of competition for jobs. I think there's a lot more universities taking on students and like graduating students than there are actually roles available. So when roles appear, especially at kind of studios that make the kind of games that you enjoy playing, that's actually one of the reasons I applied at Splash Damage, because I loved their games. I was like, I want to help make games like that. And so I wasn't actually really looking at anywhere else to apply at that point. That was my first and only choice, which is why I kind of went hard at, if I failed the art test, I'll try it again, because without leaving the UK, there weren't many other companies at the time. I think this was 2006. There weren't many other companies making the sort of games that I thought I would enjoy making and playing. So I think that's a big factor in a lot of people's decisions. Obviously, these days, the games industry is huge. It's bigger than the movie industry. And there's lots and lots of studios doing all sorts of things all over the country and the world. So I think now, 15 years on, there's a lot more options that I could have applied to if I was applying again now. So I think people these days probably have a bit more choice when it comes to what they can apply to out of university, but there will still be a lot of competition. So if you are really passionate about some specific role, some specific type of game you want to work on, you're probably going to have to be kind of at the top of your game to get into that position, because you will be tested against other people. So it's very competitive.
So what can, I guess, young designers coming through the route in towards games design, what can they do to make themselves stand out?
The competition is intense. So like, if you can get a head start on like the knowledge, it's available. Like there's things like Game Developers Conference has a website, GDC, that you can view talks. It's a yearly conference for game developers, and they often have presentations from game developers talking about all different aspects of development. So if there's an area you're interested in, like sound or animation or 3D modeling or programming, whatever, chances are you'll be able to find good industry talks from professionals on those subjects, and you'll find them on YouTube as well. And there's a lot of websites out there as well. Like for artists, ArtStation is a very popular one. Pretty much every game artist I know has a portfolio on there. So if you want to do a little research, like if I was going to apply to a company, I'd probably try and find out, A, what is their art style like? B, can I find out who is actually working there already? And if I have found them, do they have an ArtStation page or a portfolio website? And I should go and look at that and see kind of what the bar is. for the quality that I should be aiming for. Obviously, if someone's a senior artist, they won't be expecting the same level of skill from an intern or a junior or something, but at least it can kind of give you an idea of the sort of things that they would be looking for. So yeah, doing your research, I think, is really important, and like knowing about the games that they make and being interested in all aspects of that is definitely I won't say it's a requirement, but it's going to be the thing that makes the difference between someone who just comes into an interview going, oh, I love programming, give me a programming job, and the person who comes in going, oh, I love programming, and I also have played your last 3 games, and I think that these were cool things, and these are things that I would have fixed or whatever. That will give you the leg up in an interview process. So like being prepared, right?
Just knowing your stuff, doing a bit of research.
Yeah.
And I guess, and I know it's really hard for a lot of people to do, and I mean, I'm guilty of it as well. It's just not wanting to blow your own trumpet and not wanting to put yourself forwards for things and actually telling people how brilliant you are at doing something.
Yeah, it's a tricky line to walk, right? You don't want to come off as arrogant, but you also don't want to not put your best foot forward, as it were.
Yeah.
You want to showcase all your best work. You want to show that you are capable of doing the things that they want you to do, but you also should be honest as well. So yeah, it's definitely a fine line to walk.
Being in the role that you are, and you were saying before that you've got to kind of be there for your team when they are stuck with anything, whether that's technical or artistic. How do you help them get over their sort of creative block and your own?
Yeah, so that's a tricky one. Like creative block is it's a luxury that you can't really have when you're working on productions, I would say. Like we have concept artists who paint every day. They paint dozens of things. Like we've got a team of concept artists at Embark that are about, I think, 3 or 4 people, and they are making new things, new content, whether it's environments, vehicles, items, characters, every single day. And I think like there is no point that they stop. If they feel creative block, then you just have to work through it. Like you have to go, okay, well, why am I blocked? Is it because I'm not inspired by anything? I need to go and find some more reference images. I need to maybe try a different avenue of investigation or just actually sometimes just keep doing the thing you were doing to try and see if it's going anywhere. And so I think maybe just taking a step back sometimes and just restarting that process might get you past that. But yeah, like I think creative block as an artist outside of work is very different to a creative block from being an artist inside a production environment.
How so?
If I was just painting at home and I wasn't feeling it, then I would just stop or do something else. And I don't ever have to go back to that painting if I don't want to. Whereas if I'm working on a game and someone's like, hey, we've got to design a new character for the game and it's got to be released in 2 weeks. Well, if you've got creative block, that doesn't matter. You've still got to do something. It might not be the best thing you've ever done, but often with more people involved in the pipeline, it can help as well. Like if a concept artist is like, I'm stuck for ideas, then maybe they talk to the person who's going to animate it or do the 3D model, and they'll bounce some ideas around and then maybe come up with something new that actually kind of unsticks the process. So it's very good to bounce ideas off people, I think, to try and solve that.
Yeah, I think that's a key thing within the creative industries, is having that collaborative approach and being able to work collaboratively with other people, because without that, it's really hard to get that feedback and bounce ideas off each other and know what works and what doesn't work. So I think it's really important from a personal level to be able to have interactions with other people successfully, and you're not feeling like they're attacking your work or feeling like they're putting you down. It's just purely constructive feedback about what could be better.
Exactly. Constructive feedback is the key, really. It's like just knowing what it is that you're trying to improve, what the goal of the thing that you're working on is. Because like I say, it's a production. At the end of the day, you're making a product, and that product is a game in our case. And so the end goal is, what is it that the player wants? And you've just got to try and channel your creative energies in that direction. And maybe it like not every day it's going to be what you would have wanted to do if you had absolute control over everything yourself, but it's not about that. It's about being professional and looking at it and going, oh, okay, that's actually what we're trying to do. And if it were purely up to me, I wouldn't do that. But I'm working within a team towards some goal. So like if I have really serious concerns about how it's actually going to work or not, then obviously we'll discuss those. But like you said, in a creative and constructive feedback manner, and not just like, oh, I hate this. Like it's not useful to just go, oh, I don't like that. That's not useful feedback. It's much better to say like, oh, because of the size of this thing that you've done, it's not going to be visible by the player when they're standing behind this other thing, which happens a lot in the game or something. So you can be very specific, and that usually helps solve those problems.
Yeah, and I guess working in a large group, there's so many of you involved. It's never really down to just one person.
Yeah, exactly.
To do everything. It's a real team effort, isn't it?
Yeah.
Again, thinking back about your specific role, what's one of the best things about your role, and what would you say, not wanting to sugarcoat everything again, what is one of the things that you don't like least about your job?
So the thing that's always been interesting to me and continues to be is just the variety every day of like what I might be doing and what problems I might need to solve. I don't know if you've heard the analogy before of like building the rocket while it's flying. But that's what feels like a lot of the time in game development, because while we often build on existing technology, we're also making something that is essentially a feedback loop between a player and the developer, right? Me as a developer, I'm trying to make a fun experience for the player, but the player might do something completely unexpected, and then we go, whoa, how did this happen? How can we fix it? Is it even something we want to do? Maybe we'll want to lean into that and do more of it because they found something that we weren't expecting. Maybe it's something that's just broken that we need to fix. And so there's a lot of those kind of small creative decision processes that happen every day. To try and just make the game better, make the experience more enjoyable for the player. So that's the thing for me that's really interesting, because it means that I get to learn new stuff all the time. I get to learn a bit of programming. I work with engineers who help teach me that stuff. I get to see really cool art being made, even if I'm not making it myself. And we get to discuss those things in the team, and everyone's feedback is listened to. So that's the thing that really is the most interesting thing to me. And the not to sugarcoat it stuff is like everyone's aware of bugs in games, right? Like you'll see things, and even in games that have shipped that you can play, you'll find weird stuff that is just broken. And some of those things can be a real pain, like when something just isn't working and no one can figure out why, and it like everyone looks, like the engineers look at the code and the artists look at the models, and everyone's like, this looks like it should be working, why isn't it working? And you end up spending like 3 days just digging to this bottomless pit of weird behavior, and then after like however long, you realize that actually you were adding one instead of subtracting one somewhere or whatever. It's usually something really stupid in those cases. Like no one can understand why something isn't behaving the way it's meant to do, and it's just because they like forgot a little character in the code or something.
Right. Gosh, so that must be quite frustrating then, because it's not like it's this necessarily tangible thing. Like if you try and fix a car engine, you can see it all, you can take it apart, like physically see it all. But with coding, it must be quite a laborious process.
Yeah, there's a lot of moving parts, and like that's why on big projects you do need a lot of people with deep knowledge, because at some point, if I try and investigate something, it's going to go beyond my level of knowledge. When I reach a certain point of like the game engine code, I'm going to be like, right, I don't understand what this is doing anymore, help. And then go and talk to an engineer who's like, oh, okay, yes, we haven't looked at this in 6 months, but okay, let's dive back in.
How do you test the games that you're developing? Do you test as you go along, or do you like at the very end, do you have like a test before it's all released?
that would be extremely risky if you only tested it at the end. I guess it would be like if you were cooking a dinner or something, and you just like throw all the ingredients in a pan and stir it all together, and then just before you serve it on the plate, you just kind of, oh, this isn't even cooked. So like yeah, it's a massive thing in the games industry, and we have entire departments of people. I mean, various studios will have bigger or smaller departments or outsource it, but they're usually called quality assurance or testing or QA for short. And primarily the QA departments are the ones who drive the testing processes, and they'll play the game multiple times every day. And they'll find all of the problems that you thought you had fixed, and all the things that people would have missed, and they'll play the game in every possible way imaginable. And they basically track all of these things and uh, work with the development team to kind of say, okay, I was doing this when this happened, because like in order for me to be able to figure out how to fix something, I've got to know how to get it into that state in the first place. So the QA team is essential for that, of like tracking these things down, saying, oh, okay, after you jump and then fire your weapon while moving backwards, then the world turns upside down or whatever. It's like, okay, then now we know how to get there, we can try and fix it together. And so for us at Embark, the entire team actually plays the game pretty much every day. I mean, not everyone plays absolutely every day, but we have play tests of the game on a daily basis, and that's what kind of helps.
Have you got a game that you've worked on that you are really, really proud of? Like, what's been the sort of defining game of your career so far that you're really keen to shout about?
That's interesting, because I've worked on I think there were 3 games that I worked on at Splash Damage that I'm proud of for different reasons. So the first one I worked on from 2006 that was released in 2007 was called Enemy Territory Quake Wars. So I've got my nostalgia of that as being like the first game I worked on that I actually also really enjoyed playing. Like, that was another game we played every day, the entire development team, and we all enjoyed it. And I think that's visible in the finished product, like the fact that the team cared about it. And then after that game shipped, we worked on a different game called Brink, which is very well liked by the artistic game development community, but it was a bit of a flop at launch and critically didn't do all that well. But I'm happy with the work I did on it, because like we worked on a character customization system where players could make their own cool looking characters. And like I worked very heavily on that with the art director and the technical people, and I think we came up with a really good system that players did love. It was just other aspects of the game didn't hold up as well. And I actually went to Game Developers Conference in, I think, 2011 to talk about that system with my art director, and it was very, very well received, and we got a lot of good feedback from that. So that is a high point as well. But I think most recently, the game that I'm working on right now at Embark is probably the current high point, even though it's not released yet, but it's something I've been involved with from the very start, before it was even software, when it was just ideas bouncing around people's heads. So that it's really cool to be able to be there from the start of a project and kind of influence the direction that it's growing, and also be involved in building it, which I think as studios get bigger, you'll have less and less of that direct influence. And if you're at a small indie studio or whatever with like 4 or 5 people, then you're going to have a lot of that influence, and that's going to feel really good. And I find it's rarer at bigger studios, so I'm happy to have got that opportunity now.
What do you do to kind of keep your skills fresh?
That's a very good question, actually. And I sometimes feel like my skills in some areas are not as fresh as they should be. But that's just because I've moved through different roles. Like, I'm not as good of a 3D modeler as I used to be, because I don't do 3D modeling much anymore. But internally, it'll vary from studio to studio, but like, we often share tutorial videos that we've made when working on parts of the game. So like an engineer might say, hey, I've added this new feature, I'm gonna run through it, and here's how it works, and here's how I've implemented it. And there's also, like I said before, on YouTube and stuff like that, there's often developers talking about their latest innovations and systems. And there are academic papers as well that are released in the more scientific areas like machine learning and rendering. That they have like academic papers that are released with like new implementations of techniques that haven't been done before. Like, this is this looks better and runs faster or whatever, because everyone's always trying to make the best looking thing that runs as fast as possible. So if you can come up with an innovation, then you can share that with people. And so a lot of universities work on that with their like postdoc students. And that's another source for us. So like you'll see people sharing internally like, hey, I saw this paper was released the other week, we should look at doing that. So it's all very ad hoc, I would say. And it will depend on the company. Like some companies are much better at providing training for their employees than others. Some companies kind of just expect everyone to just wing it and learn on the job. But some of them, like Splash Damage, where I used to work, they got very good at putting on workshops for like training managers, for dealing with like finance issues, stuff like that, like actually bringing in outside advisors and saying, you are the team leads, you all need to understand what leadership means in a consistent way so that we're not having like drastic disparities in different departments or whatever. And I think that's something, it's kind of a growing pain of a studio. If you went to like a small indie studio making mobile games with 5 people, the atmosphere and how they learn there will be very different than if you go to somewhere like Ubisoft with 3,000 people in Montreal or whatever.
Yeah, that does sound quite different. And I guess it depends on what you want as an individual, where you want to work. It's down to where you feel comfortable working.
Yeah. And there's no standard for this either. There's no like industry body of game developers overseeing things in the UK. I mean, there's like there's IGDA, which is the Independent Game Developers Association, and then there's the International Game Developers Association, and then there is, I think, UKIE, or another body who kind of try and make things a bit more consistent in the UK game development culture as well. But it's nothing that's like game developers have to subscribe to it, so you still will find drastically different approaches depending on which studio you go to and who's running it.
Yeah. So at the end of a long day for you, when you've been in meetings or doing different things with your role, different technical or artistic things, a lot of people would come home and switch on their console and play a game to switch off. Is that just overload for you, or do you draw? Do you like do art, anything like that to help you switch on?
It's a very good question. So like I do find that as I've further in my career, like I used to play a lot more games when I was younger, I would say. Now I still do play games, but I'm a bit more selective about it because I play games as part of my day job. And I mean, that might sound like a bit of a cliche, and not everyone does get to do that. Like there will be people who are literally just cranking out art all day, every day. But because I get to play our game daily, I kind of feel that I don't want to play too many more. And if I am playing them outside of work, it feels more like research. So
You're like, wait a minute, I'm not on the clock for this.
Yeah, exactly. It's a bit tricky, but I mean, there are some games that I just love playing and will come back to again and again outside of work. But mostly, I try and relax and let out creative energies on like playing music. So I play guitar a lot, and I also paint and draw, although it varies. I sometimes like programming as well. So it'll probably depend what I've been doing more of at work. I will do more of the opposite of that outside of work. Which it's kind of weird because then it ends up blurring the line between work and home life a little bit, especially now in lockdown in the pandemic, because like going home from work for me right now is moving from the seat next to the sofa onto the sofa. So
yeah, well that was the next thing that I was going to ask, because obviously everyone's had to adapt how they've worked to some degree during the last 12 months. Have you found it quite hard being a team leader, kind of maintaining that team feeling and that collaborative working process when you're so far away? Because you were saying you're based in Stockholm, but you spend time in London as well.
Yeah. So I mean, it's definitely changed the dynamic of the team, and like because of how we work at Embark, I'm not really functioning as a team lead in the way that you might find one in other studios. We're much more collaborative than that. So I don't like have people reporting to me or anything like that. So that at least hasn't been difficult for me. But we have switched from like where we would usually do, we'd all be in the office and we'd just stand up together in a room or go to a meeting room or whatever and do our morning catch up, like, hey, what's going on? What are you working on? Is anyone blocked? Now that's all digital. So everyone's at home and we're doing it through Google Meet or Slack, and everything just has, yeah, it's moved into just purely digital communication, which some people have had a real difficult time dealing with. And so we do actually have some people who still go into the office in Stockholm because they can't work at home for whatever reason. But I would say 90% of the company is now working from home. And I think we adapted to it pretty well. Personally, I actually almost prefer it a lot of days because it allows me to focus more on things. You don't have people walking by your desk every day going like, hey, can you look at this? Or there's a lot of distractions in an office environment that I personally find it hard to switch off from. So being able to just be at home on the computer, and then most communication is either scheduled via a meeting and then we go in at a specific time and we have a goal that we try and achieve by a specific time, uh, to just having like chats in Slack or whatever where someone might message me and I can reply to them in half an hour or something when I've finished doing what I'm doing at the moment, as opposed to getting pulled out of my current train of thought because someone happens to lean on the back of my chair and say, hey, how's it going, or whatever. So it's definitely, it's not for everyone. I think it's been all right for me, but I definitely miss that kind of human interaction at the office and just being it, like I said before, like bouncing ideas around. It's just much harder. You don't get those kind of organic discussions happening, which is very important in a creative enterprise, actually. So, yeah, it's hard to say what the impact has been, but we're managing.
Yeah, and I guess you'll see the impact maybe in the coming 12 months, and what has changed and will go back, and what has changed and actually will continue to be different.
Yeah, exactly. Like I think for us in the games industry, we're very lucky because all of our work is digital anyway. So it was one of the easiest things to do. Is like the only thing we had to do was like bring our computers home. And then the big difficulty is, do you actually have space where you can work? Because if you don't have room, or if you've got kids and animals flying around the house all day, then obviously it can be hard to focus on work. But I think compared to a lot of other industries, we've had it very easy.
Yeah, because I guess, like you say, more particularly in the last 12 months, more and more people have been buying consoles, have been buying games, have been spending more time at home, and it's I guess it's also been a bit of an escapism for people, because they can leave COVID at the door and go and play Call of Duty or whatever it is.
Yeah,
Minecraft
definitely.
even.
Yeah, I think there's other stuff as well that's been coming out recently, like Facebook have released their Oculus VR mobile headsets and things like that, and I've seen more and more of those appearing in the home, maybe more in Sweden than the UK, but it's definitely had a much stronger uptake than I think a lot of people were expecting, partly probably due to everyone being locked down and needing some kind of escapism, like you say.
So do you think at Embark Studios you will see that and will try and develop new technologies, not just games, but other things to go along with gaming that will help to grow the business, perhaps?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that's something we were already looking in that direction even before COVID hit and lockdowns began. Like at Embark, we started the company with the idea that, or I shouldn't say we. I only joined like a month after the company started, but the founders of the company wanted the vision that they wanted to enable more people to be able to participate in the creative aspect of games rather than just being a consumer. So instead of just like buying Call of Duty and playing Call of Duty, instead you're like, okay, well, I want to modify this experience. Like you said, Minecraft is a good example. Roblox has also been really, really popular and continues to rise in popularity. Lots of kids, teens playing that, building things themselves. So it becomes more of a kind of back and forth with players and other players, players and developers. It's almost collaborative now in some of those games, and that's definitely something we at Embark are trying to build towards. Is not just making a product for someone to consume, but instead making a platform or a service where people can kind of collaborate and participate and make new things. So hopefully, like, the aspect of everyone kind of getting more on board with games and game design is helping us in that regard. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think you've got quite a niche little route into education as well, because with lots of homeschooling happening, I think people are seeing the benefit of gaming, because I know that there's a lot of parental concerns around screen time and what they're actually what the children are being exposed to. But on the flip side of that, gaming can be used as a really amazing educational tool. Is Embark doing anything on that lines with education? And
we haven't really looked into education as a specific thing, but certainly no one has ever ruled it out. And there's definitely avenues of what we're building that could work towards that. And actually, one of the things that we often try and do is give back to the community as well via open source. So, like, rather than building things that we sell or keep secret, we actually donate our source changes back to the community who built the original software. And so that's usually a good way in for academia and like education as well. All of the source code for a lot of the software we use is actually available to everyone publicly. They can just go and download it and have a look at it, which a lot of games companies don't do at all. And that's one of the ways that I think, especially engineers, programmers, can get into like use to research their own background into what they want to build. Those resources weren't really available 10, 20 years ago. Like, you couldn't just go and look at the source code for whatever your favorite game is, but now you can in a lot of ways. So it's hard to say exactly how those things will impact education, but there's definitely more movement in that regard. Like Scratch, I don't know if you heard of it, is a programming language that is more accessible and a good kind of stepping point into programming, because especially with everyone having mobile phones and things these days, like, technology is everywhere, right? And if you can understand how to work with technology and build things using technology, I think that's a great, at least, peek into that world for people, so that they can kind of take an easy taste of it and go, is this for me or not? And then use that as a stepping off point into the more detailed aspects of it if they want.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a seed growing there with how it could be used in education. Definitely, we'll just have to see where it goes. I mean, I guess in 5-10 years time, it may be something a lot bigger. Where do you see yourself in sort of 5 to 10 years time? That's a big question, I guess.
It is. Given that I am really enjoying what I'm doing at the moment and I can't see that stopping, I'd be happy just continuing working with a talented and fun group of people, such as the team I work with at Embark, making games that I enjoy and care about, and that I think people will enjoy and care about. I mean, that's kind of the dream for me, and I'm lucky enough to have been doing that for the past 10, 15 years. And if I can continue doing that, that's fine. Like, I'm not looking to become a kind of entrepreneurial new startup millionaire, whatever. That's not something that interests me. I'm just happy making stuff go boom.
So as long as you continue to be happy and enjoy what you do, then I get that's the most important thing, isn't it?
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
we always ask kids at school or young children, what do you want to be when you're older? It's not, how do you want to live your life?
Yeah.
We kind of prescribe them already when they're young into these little boxes, saying, do you want to be,
Yeah.
a doctor? Do you want to go and work for the police? We don't say, do you want to be happy?
Yeah. And if you're in a place where you can live comfortably and you can do something that you're interested in that doesn't bore you, I think, for me anyway, that's ideal. And, like, I don't think it's necessarily useful to always be looking to the next, like, oh, but I could get a promotion, I could become the boss, I could start my own company or whatever. Like, not everyone wants to do that. It's not necessarily the right goal for everyone. And more and more people have been realizing that recently. It's like you don't actually have to be trying to get the next step up to the next promotion and become your own boss or whatever. It's like if you're happy with what you're doing and other people enjoy the work that you create and you can make a living doing that, then that's enough.
Yeah, there's no problem. I think that's really important advice and sage advice is, do what makes you happy, not what you think other people think you should do.
Unfortunately, it's quite difficult to get to that position for everyone, I think. So if you manage to get there, don't let it slip through your fingers.
If you were to give one bit of advice to someone, to say 15-year-old, your 15-year-old self, perhaps, when thinking back to those graphic design lessons we had, what would you say to someone wanting to go into the gaming industry like you've done, either on the creative side or the technical side, or into another creative discipline in general?
I think I would say be inquisitive and be humble about your own work and be polite about other people's work. Ask them if they want feedback before you give it, for example. But yeah, primarily just be inquisitive. Like don't take no for an answer in a bad way. Like if something is blocking you, investigate how you can solve that. Like if you don't know something, do some research. Is it something you can learn on your own time? Is it something you would have to pay for a course to do? Do you know anyone who does that? Reach out to people, ask them for advice, and and just be polite about it. Because I think a lot of people are quite happy to help, especially if you just, as a student, if you just reach out to people and say, hey, I've really enjoyed your work, your games, whatever. Do you have any advice for me how to get to where you were? You'd be surprised how many artists would actually just give you a response and say, hey, here's how I did it. Here's some video tutorials that I watched 2 years ago that you might find useful. And I actually did that at the time when we were in high school. I emailed a couple of my game art heroes as part of one of my projects. And I got responses from both of them that were very gracious, friendly, and enlightening. And it's like, just try that. Like, it doesn't hurt to send an email. It doesn't hurt to ask a question on Twitter or on a forum. And as long as you've got access to a computer, that's essentially free. It's just your time. So
Follow the spark and be inquisitive.
yeah, exactly.
Okay, so we're kind of at the end of the interview now. So if you want, you've got time for a free plug for your work in Embark Studios. So if people wanted to find out more about you or Embark Studios, how would they do this?
So my website is just greveson.co.uk. I think you can also get there via predictable-paul.co.uk for some reason. I don't know why. If you want to find out about Embark's open source stuff, what we're doing with the coding community, you can go to embark.dev. And if you want to find out about what jobs are open and because we are always hiring in Stockholm, you can go to embark-studios.com.
Brilliant.
And we're also on Twitter, like Embark Studios on Twitter, and I'm Moppius on Twitter for some reason.
So there's absolutely nothing wrong with young technical artists and young game designers getting in touch with people just off the cuff at all.
Yeah, I mean, Twitter and forums are a great tool for that. Like the Polycount is a forum that's still going, that was active when I was getting into game art, and there's a lot of professionals and students on there who are always discussing like what's the latest in game art. So the Polycount forums are a great resource. And yeah, Twitter is a great resource as well. If you just do some searches, have a look through like if you can find artists on Twitter and you just send them a message or whatever, then as long as, like I say, you're polite and not being rude or anything, quite often they'll be happy to respond. Don't get put out if they don't respond. They might be getting 4,000 messages every day, but like keep trying. Yeah. I think actually there's one other thing I wanted to just check. I forgot to check this before. So there's a website called gamedevmap.com that is basically a world map of all the studios, game development studios that exist.
Oh, brilliant.
And so you can just go to that and then kind of click on a location and they will tell you which studios are there. And there's like 6,000 studios around the world, like 200 of them in Paris, for example, 61 in the southwest of England.
So if you wanted to get out of the country and work somewhere else, it's definitely a career that could take you international.
Absolutely. I would say actually the games industry is one of the most international industries that I can think of. Like, we regularly interview applicants from all around the world. I know many of my ex-colleagues now work in America, Canada, Asia, Europe. There's studios everywhere, and definitely like studios are quite happy to help with stuff like relocation and like visas and things like that. If you really want to, if you're the sort of candidate that they're after, that's actually a really good way of seeing the world. I think if you're good at what you do, you will probably be able to get hired anywhere in the world. So that's a really cool aspect of it as well. That's why I now primarily live in Sweden. So that's cool.
Oh, well, it sounds like you're really passionate about what you do, and it sounds like you really enjoy what you do. So that's really positive to hear. It would have been an awful interview if you'd hated it. Thank you very much for talking to us, and wish you many, many more happy years of enjoyment and fulfilling work.
Thank you. Well, hopefully I inspired some people to go and investigate the games industry. Maybe I'll hire someone.
You never know. Well, they can get in touch with you now.
They can indeed.
That's brilliant. Thanks for listening to the Storyboards Creativecast. I hope you'll join me for the next one. Don't forget you can find us on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter to keep up to date with all our latest information and events. Why not subscribe to our YouTube channel as well? You can also email us at info.thestoryboard@gmail.com.